Welcome to our podcast, The Better You Are, The Better You Are. Whether it is physically, mentally, or spiritually, when you know better, you can do better. And when you do better, you'll be better. On this podcast, we share knowledge, expertise, opinions, and experiences. All things that can help you. Welcome to our podcast, The Better You Are, The Better You Are. Whether it is physically, mentally, or spiritually, when you know better, you can do better. And when you do better, you'll be better. On this podcast, we share knowledge, expertise, opinions, and experiences. All things that can help you to change the game. By the time we're done, it's hard for you not to be encouraged. So join us. The better you are, the better you are.
Okay, we're excited to be back here today. We have Reverend Hazel Owens, who is an associate pastor at Common Ground Christian Church, Midtown, and is a licensed marriage and family therapist associate and owner of Owens Counseling and Consulting Services, LLC, integrating the worlds of faith, culture, and therapy. She has a master's in human resource management from Indiana Wesleyan University. And in 2016, Hazel took a leap of faith and pursued her purpose and calling to full-time ministry that includes integrating ideals of faith and therapy. This faith leap led her to dual degrees at Christian Theological Seminary, a master's of divinity, and a master's in marriage and family therapy. We also are blessed to have Dr. Glenda Rawls, who is an associate professor of counselor education and unit director at Western Michigan University. She earned her doctorate in counselor education from Western Michigan University in 2008 and has been a nationally certified counselor and licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan since 2007. In addition to training future master's and doctoral level therapists, she also has a decade of clinical practice and supervision experience. Well, that sort of plays into some things we have like imposter syndrome and stereotype threat. And I'd like to just read some definitions of those two and have a conversation about that. So imposter syndrome is the condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally, despite being high performing in external objective ways. And this condition often results in people feeling like a fraud or a phony or doubting their abilities. Whereas stereotype threat is defined as a situational predicament in which people feel at risk of conforming to stereotypes about their social group. And it's felt to play a significant role in things that I deal with, like academic performance and testing. So what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with you, Glenda. Those definitions, do you agree with those? And what thoughts do you have on those two? Are they similar? Are they different? And then we'll talk more things about that.
Yes, so I think the similarity is the self-evaluation, right? That both in imposter syndrome and in stereotype threat, you have this internalized evaluation of oneself. And sometimes that internalized evaluation with the imposter syndrome is the idea or belief that I don't measure up or I'm not as good, right? So that's more internalized and reflective of oneself and their abilities. With stereotype threat, there's a similarity of the similar self-evaluation. The difference is that you're also spreading that out towards looking at stereotypes, looking at what others may perceive of your ethnic group in a racialized, stereotypical way, and then imposing on that idea on oneself and believing that what one believes about one racial group, and you may be a member of that particular racial group, is what they may perceive about myself. In both of these cases, both stereotype threat and imposter syndrome, it can impact, as you mentioned, about one's performance. It can impact one's abilities. Remember, when want to engage in task, we have to have a certain sense of self-efficacy or belief that one can do something. And what stereotype threat does to self-efficacy and what imposter syndrome does, it lowers and minimizes one's ability and belief in themselves and their confidence to be able to accomplish something. So imposter syndrome and stereotype threat really minimizes one's ability and self-confidence and belief system in themselves. One of them also is connected to race and racism, which was some of the things that we've been talking about here today. But both get internalized, both have these thoughts, these voices within one's head that can be very destructive and very in some ways, self-sabotaging, because it can affect one's performance. Now, the other thing with imposter syndrome, especially sometimes when you can be very high performing, right? And that's another kind of thing that I want to talk about. You don't believe that you're high performing and that you may struggle with taking compliments. You may struggle to really believe that you've accomplished something or done well with something. That's another way that imposter syndrome can affect someone, is that even if they're doing well, even if they're high performing, they don't believe that they're doing well and they don't believe that they're high performing. With a stereotype threat, I think the challenge with that is the belief that they potentially can't perform as well because of the negative stereotypes associated with the group, racial group and/or gender, because there's been a lot of studies that have been done related to stereotype threat, a lot with women in science and math, a lot with people of color in math and science. And so a lot of the research that Dr. Steele's work produced was that because of this stereotype threat, it does weigh an impact on one's performance, and an individual will have a tendency to not perform as well. And then when you couple that, especially in an educational setting, with low expectations from instructors and educators, that can also lead to very poor educational outcomes and may be very disastrous impact with regard to being able to accomplish things that an individual needs to accomplish or a student needs to accomplish.
Did you have any thoughts to add to that, Hazel? I wanted to say that when you talked about, Hazel, and I don't know if this was in a different conversation or today, but you talked about defeatism and I think I mentioned, and I apologize, I don't know if it was today or earlier, but talking about MCAT scores and taking tests. And I recall working with a resident who was a medical student applying for residency. And I said, where are you applying? She said, oh, I'm applying everywhere. I just want to get in. And I said, no, that's not the attitude you have. You're good. You should get in. Well, I had to take the twice. Well, that shows you got up and you took that test twice. You took it 3 times. You took it 4 times. You're perseverance. So you walk in with the attitude of, I'm somebody who can go through struggles, go through obstacles and still persevere, as opposed to oh, you weren't good enough. And as Glenda points out, that's sort of embedded or unfortunately times imposed upon other people, like, well, you just weren't good enough, versus I didn't have the connections. I was sick. I was other things. Turned out she had a back problem during her first test. I'm like, girlfriend, you need to tell them, here's what I bring to you, the value I bring to you. I walk in here, I've had, illnesses and other things, yet I'm somebody who can persevere through hard times and still do well. So she did get into a residency. She called me and told me she was excited. So, but that's the things that hurts me when I talk to young women and people, that they internalize that. And how can we help them? What are some strategies maybe that we can help them to overcome stereotype threat or imposter syndrome?
Well, I think like even how you helped her reframe her thoughts around having the test multiple times, or just feeling like she just would just take whoever's going to accept her, right? Even though it may or may not be the best fit for her, or it may not be in alignment with who she is and her skill set and all that good stuff, right? Where she felt the need to just settle because I'll just take anything. And it's probably because of this belief, because I really don't care anything. And so to have someone come alongside to help reframe that thinking. Well, let's look at it this way. So you were ill when you took that test. You come from a socioeconomic background that, you were at all kinds of odds to keep going to this school, and yet you worked and you saved and you went to class and you showed up and you did this thing, right? That perseverance piece. And I think also naming that, yes, it is exhausting, right? So how do we hold the both and? I actually was with my colleagues celebrating my obtaining a full licensure. And so it's a group of us that went through the process together. And so we made it a pact that each one of us who obtained full licensure, we would go and celebrate. We would do something to celebrate. Because when we graduated, it was May 2020. When we entered residency, it was in 2020. We were not trained nor prepared to do counseling in the height of racial unrest and a global pandemic. And so I, out of the group, was doing 2 programs at the same time, a divinity program and marriage and family therapy, full programs. And so because of all of that and that pushing through and that persevering, right? This is something that we decided that we would do. Now, I also am the last one to get my full licensure, right? I'm also the one out of the group who did not test. And I had to take it again. And then next thing you know, I'm in residency, but my caseload explodes. I have no problem getting clients, but there was a part of me, because I didn't pass the exam on the first time, that felt like, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I a fraud to my clients? Why are they coming to see me, right? So, but this group really encouraged me along the way. And surprisingly, it's a group of white women that are like, hey,
right.
This
Amen.
is hard. This is what you're capable of. We've seen your work. We've seen, and so having that someone, and if you don't have someone to help you reframe, how can you feel what you feel, but then take a step back and ask yourself, okay, but what are the conditions around this that I am enduring, that I'm persevering through, or what have you? What is true about my capabilities? What is true about who I am? What is true about my skill set? And just because there are facts present, there doesn't mean that there's truth present, right? And so especially when it comes to feelings, we have to be very careful to what these emotions are telling us, right? But then the other piece is, okay, and I'm going to go back because Dr. Glenda did, make a really important connection with racism with some of this, right? So where did these narratives come from that you don't belong here? How much representation did you see people who look like you in this space? Why is there a lack of representation? Right? And so you have to ask yourself these questions. And so I do think that part of it is a reframing of how you're looking at the situation and remembering who you are.
Amen.
And I'll say, to build on that, I think addressing the negative self-talk, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes that's a part of it. And the more that you say these negative things, the more that that's connected to what you think and what you will do. And so I think in addition to reframing, as Hazel mentioned, and really looking at who can provide that reframe for you, I think the other part of it is really actively engaging in writing down all those negative thoughts and ways that you can also counter that, because we know that certain ways of thinking, like gratitude, will rewire the brain. So if you constantly are engaged in a lot of negative self-talk around your skills and abilities, we know that will set certain things in motion. So it may also be helpful to write those things down, write those negative beliefs, write those down. And as I like what Hazel mentioned, what is the facts or truth that can counter those? Because sometimes it's not until you write it down, or it's not until you think it through, that you have the kind of evidence that might reframe or reshape that belief. And so I think actively engaging in that and talking with someone, either family, friends, but also therapists. We do a lot of work, and we can do a lot of work around really helping people with their negative feelings, negative thoughts, negative emotions. And sometimes stereotype threat and imposter syndrome can be associated with some negative self-talk and thoughts. The other thing is, we're exploring, and Hazel mentioned this too, and I want to highlight again, exploring where all this is coming from and helping the individual see the connection. Is some of this coming from racial environments and racial issues? Is some of this coming from being first gen and moving through a chartered path that's you've never gone through before? Maybe connecting someone with other people who have been in similar circumstances, who also are treading and trailblazing through things. And then also, I think, just also understanding, your life's journey and putting it into context, because sometimes we are figuring it out as we go along. And I think if there is some hesitation and understanding that sometimes that is the process, that sometimes we're figuring it out, and a lot of people don't always know the answer as well, that may also minimize things, as well as the internalized pressure that we place on ourselves. So it may be helpful to see where all of these things are coming from, helping the individual pinpoint, where these connections can be made, and helping them kind of think through either reframing it or addressing some of that negative self-talk.
Yeah. It's as you're talking about the negative self-talk, one of the things I tell my clients to think about is, would I say this to my friend?
Mm-hmm.
If my friend came to me with this same situation, with these same thoughts, with this in this same experience, what would I say to my friend? Because chances are going to be more empathetic with our friend. We're going to help our friend to see the value of who they are. Amen. Right? And so if we would say some empathetic, compassionate things to our friend, if we would remind our friend of the value of who our friend is, if we would do all those things that Dr. Linda said in helping our friend begin to expand the context of what this whole situation may be that's causing you to feel this way, then whatever you would say to that friend, write that down, but then repeat it to yourself. And repeat it again. And repeat it again.
Amen. Put it on your mirror and watch it and see it every morning or something like that.
Right. Because it's that repetition that's going to lead to a belief. It's Muhammad Ali that says it's the repetition of affirmations that leads to a belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, then things begin to change.
Amen.
Right. And so, I just, so as she was talking about the positive self-talk, sometimes it's easier to just think about, okay, what would I say to a friend? What would I say to a family member? Because I know I'm going to be more empathetic and gracious with them.
I had somebody say to me once, "Oh, whenever I tell you anything, you blow it off, and you make it seem not important." I said, "No, I'm trying to get you to change the narrative. There are positives in this." And she was like, "Oh, I'm not one who's going to sit. We're going to sit here and we're going to just, feel badly together. What's the next step?" But no, there's positives in this. And who hasn't failed at something, in life, and multiple things, and going through classes and tests. When I talk to young people going to college, you're going to fail at something, but you take it again. You take that class again, or you take the test again, or you go change what you're doing, and you know it better the next time. When the value of not passing something the first time is that you study more for it, and you're more on it. Nobody can tell you don't know the stuff this time, so.
Well, and I want to go back to me failing my licensure exam, right? Mm-hmm. So again, I graduated in May 2020. I was approved to sit for the exam, I want to say that October of 2020, somewhere along in there. I'm exhausted. Right? I just finished 2 degree programs. There's a whole global pandemic happening. Right. There's tons of racial unrest. I have 25 to 30 clients that I'm seeing every week who I'm sitting in the same mess with them. So we're trying to figure this out together. We're both all upset about what's happening with Black and brown folks in this country. We're upset with this global shutdown. And I'm trying to study for an exam.
That's important. Very important to your career.
Yeah. Okay. We just gonna have to take this again, right?
Amen.
Because there's a lot.
Cry a little bit,
but that's it. You cry a little bit, and then you get back up.
Amen.
And you keep it going.
Amen.
And I think when I think about racism, and I think about how Black and folks have been conditioned to survive. I think that there does come a threshold of where we're tired of just having to pick it back up and keep it going, right? And I think that there's value to that. I think that needs to be named. I think that needs to be honored, or what have you. And the unfortunate reality is that we're in a system that continues to poke us time and time again, right? And so one way to resist is to take your moments, try to feel upset, to be frustrated, to do a thing, to engage in some joy, to take some go and rest, right? So that you can get filled up to keep pushing yourself to keep going.
Amen.
But yeah.
Good rest, nutrition. Did you have something else to say, Glenda? Because I just want to recap all those things again, just to.
Yeah, no, I think I want to highlight 2 things. I think that, and build on what Hazel is saying, I think having that self-compassion is important.
Amen.
Right? That treating ourselves and seeing ourselves as human beings who can make mistakes, can not get things right the first time, I think will also help as we talk about this stereotype threat and imposter syndrome, that so much of what we're going through really eliminates our humanity, but part of our humanity is understanding we're on a journey and giving ourselves compassion while we're on that journey, I think is important. So I just wanted to highlight something that Hazel said, because I think it was really, really important. And the way she framed it is how you would give advice to your friend. I agree. I think we tend to be a little bit more compassionate to others, but we also need to give ourselves a dose of self-compassion. And then I think the other thing that I was taken away with what Hazel was saying is the need for rest and the need for recharge in order to be able to face some of the challenges and things that we deal with. And we don't understand that enough, or the significance of that is enough, because some of the things that we do is very exhausting. Some of the things, especially as we talked about living in a very racialized society, some folks have marriages and kids and work and career. And all of this is all going on at the same time. And so being able to engage in our own levels of self-care, whatever that might be, but being really intentional about maintaining our own wellness is important. Oftentimes when we go on the airplane, they always say, if we're in a point of disaster or emergency, put your mask on yourself and then to other people. I think sometimes we miss that. I think sometimes we don't understand we have to take care of ourselves in order to fight the good fight. And I think we sometimes miss that, just like we miss the self-compassion. I think sometimes we miss that. And I'm, guilty of that as well, because sometimes we're going and going and going, and we don't stop and pause and be able to reflect and recharge. And how we do that can be a variety of ways. I mean, there's 8, 11, 10 dimensions of wellness, and there's all these different kinds of ways that we can really engage in certain aspects of our wellness. But I do think that I would be remiss if we didn't also pause and highlight those two things that Hazel so eloquently talked about when she just mentioned responding to, someone who's dealing with those challenges of negative self-talk, racial stereotype, that threat, and imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it's so true. You can get exhausted and sometimes you just need to rest. It's okay to cry. You can't sit around crying, but and it's okay to cry. It's good to cry. It's good to rest. It's good to not be isolated. And I just want to I've been writing down notes so I can go back and just emphasize some of the things that I pulled out of this. We need to reframe the narrative, change the narrative. It's, and put it into, this is helping me. This is, feels really bad, but it's all going to turn out for good later on for where I'm going on my path. And so I change that narrative. I tell myself positive things. I need to have compassion for myself. I need to do something, occasionally nice for myself. I'm not just here to serve others. Serving is great. But as Glenda pointed out, I always tell my husband that too. He laughs because I need to eat on a regular basis or my head just won't think. And he said, you sit down and eat before your children eat. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then I can help other people. I'm just not functional if I don't do that. Step back, as Hazel pointed out, step back and evaluate things. Look at the facts and look at what is true, and tell yourself the truth and the facts and not what other people are trying to pour into your head. Look for others for support. I cannot emphasize enough not to isolate yourself and sit there and I can't tell people that I didn't pass this test, or I can't tell people I'm not feeling good about myself, or I can't tell people that I'm not sure. I don't know. Go ask you. I tell my daughters all the time, when you go to college, you be the first one in that professor's face. I don't understand this. Help me understand this. Or other people. Groups that you can work with in classes or in whatever, as Hazel pointed out, I had this support group that encouraged me and said, girl, you're don't let this test define you. You define you. I love what she said when she said, remember who you are. And I tell my daughters, you are a child of the Most High God, and you can do anything that God has put you on that path. Don't let other people. I love that scripture that says, taking every thought captive. If you're not telling me what God's telling me, you got to get out of my head. And I'm not accepting that, because I am a child of God. I can do whatever path he's put me on. And there's nothing that can stop me once I get on that path. And I tell my daughters, you do your best, and let God take care of the rest. And I'll be frank, sometimes, as Hazel pointed out, your friends can tell you things or that you wouldn't say to your friend, but sometimes your friend needs to tell you, you didn't study, you shouldn't have been, out there with this boyfriend or whatever, or partying all the time. You got to put a little bit more effort into it. I'm here to help you, but I'm here also to tell you the truth. So I think prayerfully this has helped people. Anything else you two want to add to that, or anything I missed as an important point to reflect on? I can't thank you enough. I was tired when we started this podcast. I feel rejuvenated. I feel like I love listening to you too. I just love the discussions we have. I pray that it has helped one or more people. And I think it certainly should be very positive. And I loved everything you both said. And I can't thank you enough for being part of this podcast.
Thank you for listening in today. Weren't you inspired, encouraged, and uplifted? We hope so, because we're praying the best for you. Join us again next time for more betterment, because the better you are, the better you are.